blind women, relative risk here, 1.2, meaning that yes, they are slightly higher risk. And if the higher risk is due to exposure to light at night, then approximately 16% of breast cancer we're seeing presently in the United States is due simply to light at night. And again, this is the relative rate of breast cancer in sighted women compared to blind women. In the United States, there's almost double rates in sighted women, and similar rates in these countries. And because of that, shift work was named by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. That's their website right there. It's got a lot of really interesting stuff. But they came out with this that points out that there is sufficient evidence in experimental animals for the carcinogenicity of light during the daily dark period. What they did was they said shift work involves circadian disruption that is probably carcinogenic to humans, which is a class 2A cancer, which is pretty much what cigarettes are in as well. And the American Medical Association also came up with a similar report that shift work and cancer do seem to be related. And very recently, Dr. Moda and Richard Stevens, who published one of the first papers back in the 80s, all these people pretty much looked at 150 different references, peer-reviewed publications, and then summarized the result of breast cancer circadian rhythm disruption based on the electric lighting. And there is a lot of evidence for all that. Some of the things we can do, obviously, is watch your exposure at home. If you're buying these LED lights to put in your light fixtures to save energy, go for the warm light bulbs. Those are very close to an incandescent. They have a lot more red in them, a lot less blue. Much better to have in your house if you're going to have lights on at night. You want to avoid blue lights as much as possible. iPads and computers, obviously the blue screen can be a problem, especially if you're up late at night before going to bed. Possibly there should be genetic tests for genes that may actually be triggered by that light exposure. And this is something I didn't catch on to until I saw the slide. Obviously you can change the lighting, and the Boeing Dreamliners, that new plane that Japan's been having a lot of trouble with their batteries, the way the plane is lit, since it flies transoceanic trips, is LEDs, and these are all color changing LEDs. So in the daytime they pretty much have them blue. At night they change them down to amber and red. So they try to keep passengers from not messing up their circadian rhythm too much as they're flying all these long distances. And
excuse me, I just want to ask a question. If you're buying light bulbs, you're not saying you buy an actual light bulb that's the color red or the color blue, or is there something we look at on a light bulb so that we know it's more blue or red, or both?
You have to look at the package, and it's going to say cool white or warm light, and that's pretty much the big difference. Warm white is incandescent, cool white is blue. So that's closer to what you see in sunlight. And unless you're living up north or somewhere where it's dark 12, 15, 16 hours a day, you don't want that blue light, especially.
So the warm is what we're looking for.
Warm light.
Okay, thank you.
And finally, you can get funny glasses like these things. We've all seen them on TV. They actually filter out blue light, which is why it reduces glare and all that. So they do actually work, but it's not something you really want to wear all the time. Kind of fashion faux pas. Environmental issues, there are many of them. This is the Empire State Building, the way it's lit now. They did put in LEDs. There they are. LEDs are not always good. That's a work site, a well, and 10 to 40 million birds, migratory birds particularly, are thought to be lost every year because of lit buildings. They get lost over cities and just fly around, fly into the buildings, or just fly around until they're exhausted and drop out of the sky. In the past 50 years, the Audubon Society says we've lost 80% of our migratory birds, and they believe that city lighting is pretty much the whole cause. Because of that, many cities like Chicago, Toronto, and New York, including the Empire State Building, do dim their lights during bird migratory periods. And many studies that in some places they've actually taken buildings and turned the lights off on one side of the building and left them on the other side. They saw a 10% or 90% drop in bird deaths on the dark side versus the lit side. So that's a really big problem. This is a problem that most people don't really care much about. I mean, these are bugs. So they all died because of that street light there where they hung around all night. They didn't go feeding. They didn't look for their mate. They didn't do anything that they should be doing. They just ended up dying. And they're just bugs, but a lot of really cool animals eat those bugs. And if the bugs are all sort of stuck there at the light and the predators don't know that, or if the predator does know it, they may have to fly, like bats, they may have to fly a long way just to get there, and they may not have enough energy to get back to their bat house. And even plants are affected. There's a street light, a drop globe lens, that's kind of the light dispersion that you get out of it. And this tree, because of that light, did not drop its leaves before winter, so that means probably that whole section of tree is going to end up dying. So clearly not good for plants either, especially these uplights that you put into plants. Now finally get on to something I'm much more familiar with, which are sea turtles. And here we are in Florida, and this area is the most productive nesting habitat in the world for waterfront sea turtles. Sea turtles are very sensitive to light. When we look closer, here's Boca Raton, and fortunately we are in an area where there's not as much development inland as you get, say, in Broward, Miami-Dade. So in a sense, we're in a slightly darker area. And these are City of Boca beaches. Don't worry about the letters. These are half-mile zones that the state sets up. We just use them to locate things in our area. The neat thing about Boca, here's 5 miles of beach, and these are all park areas. And literally, more than half of the beach are park areas without lighting. So that's my laboratory to study sky glow. I've got areas that have no light, and then I've got condos that don't have light as well. This is one of my parks, South Beach Park, and that's just a photo at night. The beach itself looks pretty dark, can't see much, but there's the sky. And what turtles look for to find the water, both the adult females and the hatchlings, they look for a nice dark background, which is that dune, because the vegetation disperses the light, so they got nice darkness. And then they look for a light horizon. And there's your light horizon on the wrong side. The water's over here. So if you're a female turtle coming out looking for dry sand to lay your eggs on, and you look ahead of you and see a light horizon, you're going to think, hey, this isn't a dry beach. There's water out there, so I'm not going to lay my eggs here. And what we found, since 2001, We have GPSed every track, every nest, everything, every turtle crawl we had in Boca Raton. And we can take all that data and run these density maps. And this shows in South Beach Park, between the two blue lines here, that South Beach had this one spot where there was lots of nesting activity throughout all those years. And then in 2006, poof, gone. So what happened? We were also seeing declines in nesting in this area. 2004 was a really big decline. We thought it recovered and then disappeared again. So there's not a lot of activity going on in that city park area. When we looked at where that activity was, here's that low, even dune, and there's 3 Australian pine trees. Turtles were mostly right around this area where the pine trees were. So what happened in 2006? Yeah, Hurricane Wilma in 2005, which is the end of sea turtle nesting season, so it didn't affect the 2005 turtles. But Hurricane Wilma took out those 3 trees. In fact, these 2 are gone altogether. This one is trying to recover right now. So it was a wonderful scientific study. We had trees in place, we had turtles nesting in front of them, then we came and had the trees taken out by a hurricane, and turtles left the area. So where did the turtles go? They ended up going to our condominiums. And the green are the actual turtle nests. The reds are false crawls, or non-nesting emergences. That's where turtles come out of the water and say, I don't want to lay eggs, and go back in. We expect to see a false crawl for every nest. There should be a 1-to-1 ratio. So false crawls are not all bad, but when you look at areas like South Beach, there's lots of red, but not so much green. And if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, you'd expect to see lots of reds and greens all kind of interspersed. That big red spot right there is Butts Cave, which is a great big rock on the beach. So there's no nesting there. And turtles, not being the smartest animals in the world, still try to dig into the rock. So they come out, but they don't lay eggs. But you can see the wider the condo is, the taller the condo is, the more activity you have going on in front of it. Also, the narrower the beach. And South Beach, yeah, not so much. Totally natural area that has given up all its nesting activity to the condominiums, because the condos are dark and they're shading the whole beach from the city lights behind them, which is why the turtles are finding that area. When we look for hatching, this is what we want to see. That's a normal nest emergence. There's like 100 little tracks going straight to the water. And this photo was taken in 2002. And I've seen maybe 4 photos like this since then. What we see nowadays is this. There's the egg chamber. The water's up here. And you can see the little guys are coming out in every direction. And that's a sky glow disorientation. They just come out, we call it a bomb burst. Just they go off all directions. And that nest was in South Beach Park. So that's the background it had. Lots of city light, nothing shading the beach. And that's the effect on hatchlings. Hatchlings have, basically when they come out of the ground, the lower third of their body is actually the last little remnant of yolk that they suck up into their little bellies. And that is essentially their gas tank to get them out to the sargassum. So we don't know how much gas that is. So actually Florida Atlantic University is doing studies on our beach now where we're giving hatchlings to them, and they're literally running them on little treadmills to see how much energy they burn. And it'll give us an idea. Say we had hatchlings on the beach that some of them traveled literally up to a mile. And how far does a hatchling have to crawl on the beach before he burns up enough fuel to get him out to safety? and that's what we're trying to find out. So the disorientations look bad, and they are most likely lethal to most of these hatchlings. Some of the things that Boca has done, DOT actually, back in 1998, we renourished the beach in the Spanish River, and beach was narrow before that. And what that wider beach did was expose the street lights to the beach. And in 1999 and 2000, I lost about 2,000 hatchlings every year in that area to the street lights. They were going up into A1A, they were going all over the place. I asked the city to shut the street lights off, which they wouldn't do because of safety reasons. So DOT came in with this lighting study. These are LEDs that are embedded into the roadway, and they mark the road. They don't light the road. And since this has gone in, they put them in 2001 in the Spanish River area. 2007 they expanded the project to 1.5 miles, so the whole North Boca Raton has all that, and the street lights are off. Since then I've had no disorientations whatsoever other than sky glow disorientations. One year, in fact, we had a lot of disorientations in Spanish River, and it turned out to be caused by the Florida Atlantic University Stadium. As they were putting in the lighting before they shielded it, they burned in the lights for a week, and during that 1 week period, 1 out of 4 nests in the Spanish River disoriented. So very quickly they shielded the lights at our request. Since then we haven't seen the problems, so they should have been properly shielded.
I have a question on that. Do you have any idea of the difference in cost for someone to take down uplights on a road and put it like that? Would it be less money to do that?
If you had just that and no street lights, it would be much cheaper.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Very little electrical use. These things are really neat. I should have brought the example of it, but they're not wired to anything. There's a wire that's put into the road. They literally take one of those concrete saws and just walk down the road and saw a groove, and then they shove this wire in that has these nodes, and they put one of the LED lights over each of those nodes, and so it wirelessly lights those LEDs. If a car has an accident or something and that LED pops off, all they have to do is glue a new one on and it's ready to go. So it's pretty cheap to maintain. We put in that 1.5 miles for something like $200,000, which in DOT money is kind of chump change. And the electrical use is way less, or would be, except those street lights that are still there, that are off, are still being charged by FPL, because the agreement the city has with them is to pay X a month to have the street lights, whether they're on or not. So it doesn't make a big difference under those conditions. We're actually talking with FPL now to see about incentive programs. They're talking about maybe changing it to, when they change the lights, there'll be a 4-year period where they can gradually reduce the rates and then finally get it onto a footing where you're actually saving the money. I know in Boca we spend about $80,000 every month on streetlights alone. So imagine if we cut that by 75% just by putting in proper lighting. That would make a big difference. And just to show that sky glow does have an effect, this just represents the moon phase, and that's a full moon, so there's a lot of bright light. That's a new moon, so it's darker. And if you look at the number of disorientations, they tend to focus more around the new moons. And this is actually when the FAU Stadium went on, so you can see big jump. We see that pattern year to year, and that's a real strong indication that sky glow has an influence. If you have a new moon or a full moon and a lot of light, you're reducing the effect of the sky glow. And I did mention Florida is very important. We are the largest nesting ground in the world for loggerhead sea turtles. I used to think Oman was, but it turns out that Southeast Florida is the big spot. So we have a lot to protect here. And most people just don't know how important this area is. And remember the red light thing. When newspapers start putting in stuff like this, the old red bulb beside your bedside, I don't have night lights. If I did, I would definitely look for the amber ones or a red bulb of some kind. I choose to just sort of stumble around in the dark myself. And the International Dark Sky Association estimates roughly about a third of the electrical energy we're using is wasted just into the sky with inefficient lighting fixtures. And again, that's part of the whole light pollution effect on health, lighting inefficiency, lighting safety and security, all that light's being wasted. And that's pretty much it. Be happy to answer
Can you
questions.
also comment around the inability, if you live in a city area that has this terrible glow and pollution in it, that you can no longer see the sky and the stars, and our children are growing up without even knowing that there is a sky and a universe out there? I mean, I know it's maybe not as relevant as other, but maybe you could just have a couple of comments on that?
Yeah, I remember growing up seeing Milky Way all the time, even in Syracuse, and that's back when they had like 60-watt bulbs in the street lights and not much was going on, incandescent. We have totally lost that. It's estimated, I believe, that about 2/3 of the people are not going to see the Milky Way in their lifetime. My favorite story was the hurricanes, 2004 and 2005. We lost power for a week, at least in 2004. And what happened was the police departments were getting calls from all these people just scared to death at what was going on up in the sky. They had no idea what was going on. It had to be aliens coming after us and UFOs, and they were literally filling the 911 lines with all kinds of panic calls just because the stars were showing up. That really is a sad comment on humanity. When you think about it, all the great civilizations, all the Indian cultures and Western civilization cultures were based on star sighting and star alignment and all of that, and we've completely lost that now. I mean, most people, if you could see the North Star, wouldn't know where to find it. So it's just really sad, I think. I don't talk about it much. I don't do a lot of astronomy myself, but I know a lot of people are really into that kind of thing. But I really appreciate just the knowledge of everything we're based on is based on those stars up there.
And also a knowledge that we're part of something bigger.
Absolutely.
And if you never see there's something bigger, then you think this is all there is. And it's kind of a scary thought that people would live that way in the future.
Shut that down.
I have a question.
Thank you so much. I'll just get a little warm.
My question is on the cancer and the melatonin.
Uh-huh.
Has there been a study done that if you take melatonin, which is now available at the pharmacy, that there is a reverse on that?
No. You cannot take melatonin and have it help you. There actually is another system in your gut that uses melatonin. Melatonin that you eat can be broken down by the stomach just like pretty much any other food stuff, so it does not get into your bloodstream and go where it's needed. The melatonin they're producing is in the pineal gland in the brain, and it goes directly into the blood. So that's what's really affecting the circadian rhythm. Minor effect on the gut, very possibly. I mentioned the other two hormones that are involved in the appetite suppression and appetite enhancer.
Because they suggested for jet lag, obviously, to get your rhythm back, So,
Just suggested.
but
It's probably more of a placebo effect than anything. Physiologically, there'd be no effect.
Okay.
And back on the cancer correlation you're putting with the by geographic area showing the light, like in North America and Europe, along with that would be the amount of energy it took to make the light, which also creates carcinogens. It's not just the light itself, it's the power plants that make the light, which create the mercury in the atmosphere, and it's not just the light itself, it's why we're producing all those chemicals. That's that's another causer, not that, well, if we had less light, then, well, we're making all this energy to make the light, so it's like...
The only thing is, there's very few of those pollutants, even mercury. It's not really a carcinogen. They rank them as carcinogens. There's very little correlation between them. Mercury is obviously a toxin, a neurotoxin,
Right.
but as far as being a carcinogen...
Well, I mean, but, you know, from coal, there's a lot, there's coal
There's
fire,
lots of
there's
stuff.
lots of stuff, I mean, that...
There's a big experiment going on right now in China where, you know, there's cities that it's almost like London in the 50s. You can't see somebody across the road because there's so much pollution. And then they got the light thing going as well. So we're going to learn a lot from that probably in the very near future.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well,
I have to be someplace. I truly enjoyed that. Good to see everybody.
Right, thank you
Thank
for
you for
coming.
inviting me.
Thank you. I wanted to bring it back down to Lake Worth, since we all live in here. And Wes, you've served on the Historic Preservation, he's chair of the Historic Preservation Board, and you've served on that for how long now?
For about 3 years this stint, but then before that I was on the Planning and Zoning Board for about 8 years.
Oh, okay. So, having all that experience, you probably are fairly familiar with what's going on with the city in terms of what future investments they're looking at, and it's my understanding that they're looking to replace some of our aging infrastructure.
Well, there's the Lake Worth 2020 plan that's being discussed now, and some people are calling it the 2030 plan as they identify more projects that relate to infrastructure. But all this really would need to be plugged into that, and it should be plugged into that as they're looking at upgrading our electric facilities and then also the street lighting. And street lighting is mentioned a lot. Right now, many portions of the city are dark, and that is a safety concern. But if we had light that was focused down, like the good doctor showed us